I'm Connor Old, and welcome back to another episode of Old's Oscar Countdown, and we're here at the penultimate one, the big one, my final predictions for the 2020 Oscars. We've been through this entire journey, this shortened season, trying to keep you guys updated, multiple videos a week now that we're getting sort of later into these crazy times. I've been trying to give my reactions to all the different award shows, but here we are. We're going to take all that data, all that information, all that analysis, all that discussion, and now bring it over here to what I think is going to win for the Oscars. Now, just at the top, I'm going to say that I will not go into super in-depth into every single category. I will try to explain my reasoning, but essentially what I'm going to do is explain my reasoning why I'm picking a movie to win Best Picture over another movie. I'm not going to say why I don't think Ford v Ferrari is going to win Best Picture, or even I'm not even going to say why the number 2 choice is not going to win and my pick is. Things like that. I'm just going to explain, for the most part, why I think my movie is going to win and why the numbers either back it, or sometimes the added factors of subjectivity come into play, and you just predict it in that sense using your experience and your historical knowledge of the Oscars, which is what I have, and the reason why I think people come to my channel for analysis and thoughts. But I also want to mention it's not the end. Of course, I'll be giving my Oscar reactions a Monday morning when they actually happen, or I guess probably more like a Monday evening, and once I collect my thoughts. But then after that, if you know, I've been doing this for over 3 years now. I always have a new series, a new channel. The channel that keeps on going, and I keep on uploading videos. So what I'm going to be doing this year, as mentioned in the past video, is the top 10 of the 2010s, where each and every week I break down a different genre and give my top 10 of that certain genre. So for example, the first one that we're going to be doing is romance. So I'm going from a top 10 from 10 to 7, including honorable mentions one week, and then next week will be 6 to 2, and then 1 week dedicated just to the top romantic movie of the 2010s. And I'm doing that for a bunch of different genres: action, sci-fi, fantasy, documentaries. So there's going to be a lot of that stuff going throughout until we come back for the next Oscars. Hopefully I'll be planning to be back for that as of right now. But let's jump into the 2020 Oscar reactions and predictions, starting off with Best Picture. And my Best Picture winner, who I think is going to win, is 1917. Now, this sort of been a two-way race that a lot of people are predicting either 1917 or Parasite. I'm going with 1917 for a bunch of reasons. First, I think the numbers back it up. The guilds that have been most accurate, particularly PGA, which has predicted the right Oscar 10 out of the last 12 times for Best Picture, has also gone with 1917. It also won the DGA. It also won BAFTA. Now, there's going to be a lot of stats that are prove against it. The not editing nomination is kind of big, but you can maybe explain that away by the fact that it's a one-take movie, or the fact that there's not any acting nominations. Well, you could explain that away maybe by the fact that it was released so late in the shortened Oscar season. When I look at the movie at the end of the day, every time it has been nominated, whether it be PGA, whether it be DGA, whether it be BAFTAs, it has won. It's a movie that has been winning in a lot of categories. It has that tech support, so we know it has that. It will most likely get director, as we're going to talk about a little bit later. So it has those numbers, it has the PGA, it has the DGA, but also subjectively, I think if you think about it as on a galaxy brain level, you could figure out, what are all the details, what are the little stats, but if you just look at it plainly, simply in a lot of ways, what is more likely to win? A traditional war movie about World War I from a previously acclaimed director, or a foreign film that comments on a lot of social issues? But now we actually look past on previous Oscar winners, movies like Green Book, movies like The Shape of Water, either they don't have a political message, or they don't have a strong political message, and oftentimes they have either heartwarming endings, or they're in a lot of ways just traditionally Hollywood. Even though we think that the foreign expansion, the idea that the international branch has really been increasing, and the members of the Academy have been increasingly more and more international, which is why I think we saw the success of Parasite this season. Ultimately, I'm going to go with the movie that just seems like the previous winners, a movie that seems like a big Hollywood war epic that we've seen before. Now, if they were to do something like Parasite and give it that award, that would be phenomenal. That would be huge. But it would also show a different kind of Academy that we haven't really been seeing. I think 1917 fits in line with the Green Books, The Shape of Waters, and even the Spotlights of the world. Then, like I mentioned, for Best Director, my pick is Sam Mendes for 1917. The fact is, in the 21st century, the DGA winner has not aligned with the Oscar winner only twice in the century. So most of the times the DGA winner is also the best director winner at the Oscars. And those 2 times, one of them was Rob Marshall, which was sort of the only legitimate one, because the other one was Ben Affleck for Argo, and he wasn't even nominated at the Oscars. And if he was nominated at the Oscars, he most likely would have won. So they are very correlated in a lot of ways. Sam Mendes won the DGA. It's also notable that the directing prize over recent years, where we're talking about guys like Alfonso Cuarón winning it multiple times, Alejandro Iñárritu winning it multiple times, what the award is almost transformed into is the technical achievement of the year in a lot of ways. And 1917 is that. It's an insane movie to get made. They've put so many featurettes out there, how difficult it was to do this one take, but it's a war movie, so there's all this logistics that you have to go into. It seems very hard to direct, and therefore I think a lot of people have a lot of respect for what Sam Mendes did, and they're going to give it to him for Best Director. Then jumping into the acting races, they have been for the most part pretty typical throughout the season, and I'm probably going to stick with these, and I am sticking with these traditional 4. Starting off with Best Actor, I'm predicting Joaquin Phoenix for Joker. Not only has he sort of been a little bit overdue these past few years. You know, he won the Golden Globe, for example, for Walk the Line. He was nominated for The Master. This is sort of finally his year, I think. He's won the SAG, he won BAFTA, he won the Golden Globe, and even all those speeches, he didn't really mess it up in a way that, you know, some people thought Joaquin Phoenix is a weird guy. He's kind of strange. You know, maybe he'll tank his own chances, but in a lot of ways he has sort of used that and elevated that in terms of being charming in a lot of ways. And I think that Joker, let's not forget, had 11 nominations. And Joaquin Phoenix is a large reason why I think people like that movie. He's a central movie. He's in every frame. You know, he's a central character. He is the reason why people like that movie. So if he didn't get this win, it'd be almost a bit surprising. It's close to a lock, if anything. He's overdue. He has the numbers behind it. You got to predict a transformative performance, loses weight, has everything. You got to predict Joaquin here. Then Best Actress, I'm going with Judy. Same sort of reason, even though it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. You know, she's won everywhere. But this could be maybe the most likely for an upset, but I don't really see any of the substitutes being totally viable. Like I'm not sure if Scarlett's going to upset here, or, you know, something like a Charlize Theron, just because Renee has been winning everywhere. You know, she's playing Judy Garland, a beloved actress, a biopic, which every year there seems to be a biopic performance that wins. So this will sort of go into that line. She sings in it. There's a great sort of Oscar campaign in the sense that she has her comeback where she was a sort of big star, and then she sort of had some troubles in terms of the movies, but now she's coming back, playing this amazing performance, singing, playing a real life person. There's so many aspects. She's been winning. She has the sort of traditional Oscar narrative of the biopic, of that comeback personal story. People like Renee, I expect Renee Zellweger to win for Judy. Then Best Supporting Actor, I'm going to go with Brad Pitt for Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. A lock if there ever has been one. Not only has he done an amazing job on the campaign trail, he has also won all of these sort of precursor awards, BAFTA, SAG, and Golden Globes. And he is also very charming in the movie. He's also a movie star legend who is playing sort of this movie star type role. It's not a transformative role in a lot of ways, but it does definitely seem like maybe it's his time, that he's finally getting an award later in his life, which is traditional with actor winners, that they don't really reward them early on when they're younger, but much older. For example, you know, Paul Newman or Al Pacino, things like that. And, you know, of course, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood is a very well-liked movie. It also helps that he's essentially has a lead performance, but he's campaigning and supporting, so they like the movie. He's in a lot of the movie, therefore I think they're going to give him that Best Supporting Actor win. Then Best Supporting Actress, I'm going to go with Laura Dern for Marriage Story. So I think this is actually technically the most likely for an upset, but I still think it's unlikely, and I still think I wouldn't, 10 out of 10 times, wouldn't predict that upset, just because throughout, you know, Laura Dern is Hollywood royalty. You know, she's a daughter of 2 famous actresses. She's had an amazing career, started in the industry young, but has never won an Oscar before. So this is sort of, in a lot of ways, them rewarding Marriage Story, because I think this is the only award Marriage Story will get all night, so that'll be its sort of award. She's great in the movie. She has sort of these big speeches, which the Academy always likes, and of course she has won everywhere else, just like the other 4 nominees for sort of, you know, Joaquin, Renee, and Brad Pitt. So those 4, I think, will ultimately go on to win the Oscar. It was sort of predetermined at the Golden Globes, and I think it will stay that way. Now we're going to go with Best Original Screenplay. Now this is a category that has been a 2-way race. between Once Upon a Time in Hollywood and Parasite. And Parasite has been surging recently because it won the WGA and it won at BAFTAs. But my pick is going to be Once Upon a Time in Hollywood because of how I interpret the original screenplay category. Looking at previous years, what I found of this sort of category over and over again is that oftentimes it's either oh, this was a very original sort of witty movie and we liked the dialogue or we liked the idea of it, or it's a second place prize. So it goes to a movie that we really liked, but we didn't want to give it Best Director or Picture, so we're going to give it something here. We like the filmmaker less, so we're going to give it something here. And I think actually Once Upon a Time in Hollywood applies to both those situations. Not only is it sort of a very witty movie, it's Tarantino-esque. I think there are a lot of Tarantino fans within the Academy. It's portraying a time that they very fondly look over. And Tarantino has also won twice before, so they appreciate him, and he's actually known in a lot of ways for writing. I also think Once Upon a Time in Hollywood is probably number 3 in terms of Best Picture odds, and I think that people think of it as number 3, but they still really like it a lot, so they want to give it an award. They're going to give it Brad Pitt, so maybe this argument doesn't totally hold up, but I do think they want to give it something that is a little bit more prestigious and sort of that second place prize, because we really liked you. We couldn't give it to Best Picture, but we'll give you Best Screenplay and we'll give Tarantino something, and that's a way to sort of please that sort of movie. And if you're a fan of that movie, you should still feel fine that, oh, you gave it Best Original Screenplay, so you gave Tarantino something, so it still doesn't go home empty-handed. But it also, once again, you have to put in that subjectivity, because in these two races, you could say, well, Parasite has some of the numbers, yes, but Once Upon a Time in Hollywood also has some of the numbers with the Globes, with the Tarantino past winners, things like that. So they both have numbers, so then you have to apply some sort of subjectivity or personal opinion. And in my personal opinion, you sort of look at it, once again, simplistically. A majority Hollywood voting base, what are they going to vote for Best Original Screenplay? They're going to vote for an auteur who has a very comedic, funny, sort of nostalgic in a lot of ways screenplay of a time that they love, with great characters and great dialogue. Or they're going to vote for a foreign film. Foreign films in general often don't even get nominated for Best Original Screenplay. So in a way you could say that it is going to win because of the dialogue, because you actually see the subtitles for most audience members. But in a lot of ways, I just think that if you look at it sort of broadly, maybe it's cynically in a lot of ways, but when I think of a Best Original Screenplay, you almost don't understand it completely if you're sort of just a traditionalist American voter who doesn't appreciate foreign films in the same way they appreciate English language films. So I think it's going to take some votes away from Parasite, and ultimately Once Upon a Time in Hollywood is going to win here. Then we have Best Adapted Screenplay, and my pick is going to go to Jojo Rabbit, written by Taika Waititi. This is a movie I've believed in since it won the TIFF People's Choice Award all the way back in September. Even though some people were sort of convinced that it was going to be Little Woman, I wasn't totally on that train, and I think it's still going to be Jojo Rabbit. If you look at the numbers, it's been Jojo Rabbit. It won at WGA, beating out Little Woman. It also won at BAFTA, beating out Little Women. I also think it sort of fits that mold. If you like this movie, which a lot of the Academy I think does, it does a great job of having that blend, of having the heart, but also the humor. So I think people respect that. Let's also not forget that Taika Waititi was nominated for Best Director at the DGAs. So they like Taika in general. He didn't get nominated for director here. He got the screenplay here. They want Jojo to win something. Most likely it's not going to win for Scarlett Johansson for Best Supporting Actress. So it's going to get this prize here. Now, is there a dark horse chance that it wins? Yes, possibly. I think actually has probably a really good chance in terms of odds. You want to put some money down maybe, but ultimately, I think that Jojo Rabbit is probably going to get this award, and only this award, and sort of that will be its home prize. But, it has been doing well at the Guilds, winning at the Costume Designers Guild, of course, winning at WGA, getting that BAFTA win. So it has the nominations. It should walk away with something. It's a clever screenplay with a lot of heart, with a lot of humor. It's emotional, and I think that people will appreciate what Taika did here and give it that win. Then we have Best Cinematography, which will go to 1917, done by the great Roger Deakins. This is essentially the lock of the night. It won all the critics' awards pretty much, and the American Society of Cinematographers, and at BAFTA. He's a guy who is won a couple years ago for his very first time for Blade Runner 2049. It's a long take movie, which people really appreciate. We know Birdman won Best Cinematography when that had its sort of large run. It's also, a guy he's won before, but he's also been nominated a bunch of times. And the cinematography is showy and it's impressive, and it's the one take, and that's what you think about. He's essentially a co-author on the film, and I think people will really appreciate that and the work he did, and most likely will give it to him here for 1917. Then we have Best Animated Film, and I was sort of struggling with this, but ultimately I think you have to sort of look at what has been happening and what, not necessarily what you think the voters are going to do. Sometimes you have to think, oh, how would a voter vote this way? But also you have to think about previous historical data and what the Academy has been saying. And the Academy has been saying for Best Animated Film, Claws. So that's my pick because it dominated at the Annies. It won every single place it was nominated. Now, you could sort of write that off by the fact that, they generally like 2D animated movies at the Annies. They sort of appreciate it a little bit more than the traditional branch. True, but that actually shows a large dominance for that movie. And previous animated winners like Coco Into the Spider-Verse, Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, win and do very well at the Annie. So that's one sign. The other sign, it wins BAFTA. It beats out Toy Story 4. So now we're looking at it, a lot of people are predicting Toy Story 4 because it's a Pixar movie, and Pixar does do very well when they're nominated. But the fact is that only one film has won Best Animated Film that was a sequel, and that went to Toy Story 3, the previous movie. So they've already rewarded the Toy Story franchise, and as a matter of fact, they rewarded the last Toy Story movie. They didn't even nominate Frozen 2. That shows you how much this branch, and in general, people don't really like these sequels. I think Claws will do the fact that it has been gaining momentum. It has been winning. I think a lot of people would have saw it on Netflix during Christmas time and sort of popped it on and really appreciated it. I think Toy Story 4, the sort of maybe opinion is that it was unnecessary and unneeded, and it came out all the way back in June, I believe. So people have maybe forgot about it, where Claws has sort of that recency bias. So ultimately, what the Academy has been saying, BAFTA, Annies, they've been saying we like Claws a lot. And Missing Link won the Golden Globe, so we don't even know if Toy Story 4 has a lot of momentum. You could say that it will appeal to sort of the general branch, but I think Claws can pull this one through. And it's also, it's an original movie. I think ultimately at the end of the day, that is what matters, and I think it's going to go to Claws. Then Best Documentary, I'm going to go with American Factory. Now, this seems to be the front runner for a lot of people and sort of a clear front runner. And even though I'm picking it, I do think this is a category this shouldn't be the front runner. This is still up in the air. American Factory hasn't won a lot. It won Best Director at the DGAs, but that's a historically inaccurate category. So, Cartel Land won that award, and City of Ghosts won that award, even though those films didn't end up winning Best Documentary. And then you look at something like the BAFTAs, which gave it to For Sama, or maybe you think, oh, it's going to be Honeyland, because let's not forget, Honeyland was nominated for Best Documentary and for Best International Feature. Why American Factory over all these things? Why am I picking American Factory? Well, for a lot of reasons. First, I think a big reason is Netflix. Netflix has been doing very well, and it often gets their movies nominated at the very least, and winning, whether it be something like Icarus, or even some of their shorts like Period, End of Sentence, or The White Helmets. The documentaries have always been very well respected on Netflix, and they've been sort of they've been really great at winning Oscars in this category. And I think that it's also a movie that, yes, it has the campaign and the money behind it that Netflix brings, but it also has this sort of perfect amalgamation and appeal to a lot of voters. First, it has that American aspect, so the Americans will appreciate sort of the factory aspect and those people, and sympathize with those sort of members of the film. And then there's, of course, the Chinese members, so that will appeal to some of the more, Asian-based Academy members. So that has that aspect. So it's international, but it's also kind of local in a lot of ways. It's very heartfelt compared to, I think, a lot of the documentaries. It tackles a lot of issues, and recent winners are very much issues-based, and this tackles the issue of capitalism and globalization and the cost of rapid advancement, and as to maybe what purpose, and sort of being passed along. So I think that American Factory shouldn't be this high up as the frontrunner, because it's not a movie that has been doing well in the precursors. That being said, I still think it's a movie that is well appreciated, and I think it just seems in a lot of ways like the kind of movie that actually does win. So even though it hasn't been getting those stats and those numbers, I actually still am pretty confident that American Factory is going to win because of that international factor. It also has the local factor, also issues based. It has the Netflix behind it. It has a lot of things still going for it. Best international film, I'm going to go with Parasite, pretty obviously. Now, you could say that it's not going to win this category, and if it doesn't win this category, it actually has a very good chance at winning Best Picture, but I think this will be sort of the big award that it wins of the night. They're going to reward it here, and that's going to be its Best Picture. That's how I feel. Ultimately, at the end of the day, even though it's had a sort of historic, great success at the guilds, but also, you know, it's the most nominated international film. It should win here. If it doesn't, in a lot of ways, I wouldn't be that shocked, but still I would be very surprised. Then we have Best Editing, and this is a category I actually feel confident in, even though it's a two-way race between Parasite and Ford v Ferrari. Now, my pick is going to be Ford v Ferrari. Why? It has its stats behind it. It won at BAFTA. It didn't compete against Parasite, so that's notable, and Parasite beat it out at the Ace Eddie Awards. But I think that if you look at the category historically, oftentimes the most amount of editing wins, and the sort of flashiest, the one that has a lot of cuts and a lot of noticeable editing actually wins. Even something like Bohemian Rhapsody, which just has like a lot of editing and a lot of these fast-paced moments, was the one that won for best editing. And if you look previous years, more and more, it's just the most amount of editing. And Ford v Ferrari has the stats behind it. It won at BAFTA. So if you're looking between BAFTA, you know, Ford v Ferrari versus Parasite, they both have the stats behind them, both pretty much equally. So who are you going to go with? Are you going to go with the, you know, comparing the two? Ford v Ferrari has the most amount of editing. I also believe in the fact that over the past recent years, the Oscars do like to spread out some of their love, and I don't think they're going to want Ford v Ferrari to go home empty-handed. So I think the reward is going to get here is best editing, and these sort of racing scenes alone, I think will really be appreciated. It was a hit. People liked the movie. And the reason why I like the movie is because of those exhilarating racing sequences, and I think people will think about that. I think people will think about editing, so I think I'm going to go with Ford v Ferrari here. Then we have Best Visual Effects, and I'm going to go with The Irishman. This has actually been one of the most unpredictable categories, I think, all season, and I think it is the most unpredictable category because it is the only category where I could see in a world where all 5 nominees could easily win. Some people think it's going to be Avengers Endgame, but Marvel movie has never won, and oftentimes, if you look at historical data, this almost always goes to a Best Picture nominee or a Best Picture-like nominee. For example, First Man or Interstellar or Blade Runner 2049, which had multiple other nominations. They weren't nominated for Best Picture, but they had multiple other nominations, and therefore it went to them. Or you look at something like Life of Pi or Avatar, when the Best Picture nominee is the only nominee in Best Visual Effects, you always pick that. So this year it's a little bit more confusing. And years where, you know, like Mad Max and The Martian and The Revenant, when they were all nominated, it went to Ex Machina and totally surprised everyone. So this can definitely have a surprise. So if you know, every year I think that you can't just go with the front runners in every single category, even if they make sense. You have to have some surprises. You have to go out on a limb because the Oscars will go out on a limb. And you can maybe play it safe and go number 1 and get 70%, but I think you have to make those calculated risks. And I think this is a calculated risk if you choose something like The Lion King or The Irishman. I think The Lion King could win, but ultimately I think you should go with either 1917 or The Irishman because of the fact that they're both Best Picture nominations. But I think that 1917 you could believe in total sweep and gets this tech category, but I don't think the visual effects are totally obvious the same way The Irishman is. Also, The Irishman was nominated for Best Director. It has 10 nominations total. So if this were to get no wins, I don't think it's going to get adapted screenplay. I don't think it's going to get costume design. I don't think it's going to be Joe Pesci or Al Pacino. Those are really big only chances. This actually has a chance to win, and the visual effects are a huge part of that film. So you think about the visual effects when you're thinking about that movie and the de-aging and what they're able to do with that. So while there may be some detractors for the fact of it, I still think it has noticeable visual effects. It's a Best Picture nominee, and they don't want to make sure The Irishman goes home empty-handed. I actually think The Irishman has a pretty good shot at winning here for Best Visual Effects. Best Production Design is a category I've been going back and forth all week over and trying to figure out what I'm going to pick, but I'm going to pick Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Now, if you believe in a Parasite sort of big sweep, Best Picture, Screenplay, you're going to probably pick editing and even here for Best Production Design. But for me, it's between 1917 and Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. I went with Once Upon a Time in Hollywood because it totally transformed a place that a lot of the voters recognized. Los Angeles in 1969, that's a place that they were in. A lot of the appeal of the movie is also these driving scenes where they're driving through 60s Los Angeles. So I think a lot of people appreciate that. It's also, a period film the same way 1917 is, but 1917 has a lot of these wide sort of fields and landscapes that I don't think a lot of people will think of production design because, oh, well, he's just in a field or he's just in a forest. It's not that unique where they actually have to recreate a lot of Los Angeles for Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. It's something I've been going back and forth over, but I think that the Art Directors Guild win is a little bit more predictable and more predictive of the Oscar than the BAFTA win. And Once Upon a Time in Hollywood won at the Art Directors Guild, so I'm going to go with Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, but it's really a coin flip. Then we have Best Costume Design, and in my Clear Frontrunners video, which I did all the way back in October or November, I predicted Little Women would win here for costume design, and that's my prediction right now, Little Women for costume design. It's the most obvious pick, and I think the costumes in a lot of these technical categories, because the greater voting body of the Academy is voting on these Oscars, they pick things that have the most, so the most amount of editing or the most amount of costumes. And Little Women definitely has that. It's in tradition of something like Anna Karenina or previous winners where have these sort of big poofy dresses, these period accurate dresses. And this is another sort of reasoning that I'm going with, and sort of a theory that I believe in, is that the Oscars do like to spread the wealth for the movies. And I think Little Women is most likely chance to win here is going to be in costume design, so they'll sort of give it that award there, so it won't go home empty-handed. Also, Jacqueline Duran, aside from Sandy Powell, is the most decorated in terms of wins and nominations. She's on a total roll. She was nominated twice, I think, a couple of years ago. So she's someone who's very well respected within the industry. Little Women has a sort of traditional puffy dress factor that the Oscars like. And they want to give it something, an award, because they like the movie so much. So there's a lot of factors, I think, going for Little Women. It also won at BAFTAs, but you could say, oh, Connor, but it didn't win at the Costume Designers Guild. Yeah, but it also wasn't nominated there because it came out too late, so it wasn't even eligible, or not enough people had seen it. So it has won everywhere it's been nominated for, including at the BAFTAs for Best Costume Design. I'm confident in Little Women winning here. Then we have Best Makeup and Hairstyling. I'm going to go with Bombshell, which is the obvious pick, and I think you should go with that too. It's from Kazuhiro, who was the person who won for Darkest Hour a couple of years ago and made Gary Oldman into Winston Churchill. Similar thing here. He's making Megyn Kelly, Charlize Theron look like Megyn Kelly, and then John Lithgow look like Roger Ailes, using this incredible prosthetics that he uses. And oftentimes this best makeup category has often gone to not the best crazy fantasy makeup, but the best essentially prosthetics, whether it be Vice last year or the year before that, Darkest Hour. They often like to reward this, and I think Bombshell will sort of follow in that tradition. It's also notable that Kazuhiro he was at the Oscars luncheon and he got a rapturous applause. So I think, and Bombshell is still a movie people like. It got a bunch of SAG nominations too. So let's not forget that Bombshell is a movie people like, even though it didn't get nominated for Best Picture. It has the acting nominations, and I think that people will ultimately give it here for the incredible prosthetics for Best Makeup and Hairstyling. Then we have Best Score for Joker, and I think sometimes you have to vote with your gut. Sometimes you have to say, you know what, I think this is going to win just because it feels right. And if you don't do that and you choose something else and then your gut wins, you'll feel so terrible about it. So I often feel like, even you hear my analysis, if you really feel that, it's going to be Marriage Story for Randy Newman, then pick Marriage Story for Randy Newman. But other times you have to vote with your head. Just look at the stats, look at things like that. And I'm actually going to go with Joker, using my brain and not with my heart. Even though I appreciate the score, this incredible sort of dark, dreary cello score, I really kind of probably want Thomas Newman to win because he's never won before, and I thought that narrative would build, but it just hasn't. It hasn't had a sort of narrative that we thought that has happened in these tech categories, like a Roger Deakins, for example, that happened a couple of years ago. Thomas Newman, nobody says, it's his time. This is an incredible score. Give it to him for here. Now, in 1917 is very well beloved. It could sort of just sweep up in these tech categories. But Joker, I think, is still a movie that's very well liked. And this way it gets this, and then also Best Lead Actor. And then I think it fits into the company of the Black Panthers and even The Shape of Waters or the Grand Budapest Hotels, where it has a recognizable theme, where oftentimes you want a theme that you can listen to, and that oftentimes will keep and how it would be like an earworm in Oscar voters' minds and ears. So she won for BAFTA. Hildur Guðnadóttir, who did the score for Joker, she won at BAFTA, she won at Globes. I think this sort of, there could be a surprise upset, but ultimately the numbers and the facts and the sort of category that she's in, you know, they often like to reward nominations for guys like Alexander Desplat, John Williams, and Thomas Newman. But the winners go to Ludwig Göransson and Stephen Price and these newcomers that have been nominated for the first time, but then also win. I think similar things going to happen with Hildur Guðnadóttir. This is why I'm picking Best Original Score for Joker. Then for Best Original Song, I'm going to go with I'm Gonna Love Me Again from Rocketman. This is, you know, a category that's so hard to predict every year because there's not a lot of precursors. There's not a lot of things that tell us who's going to win. Ultimately, I'm betting on Elton John. Both him and Taron Egerton have been campaigning, and it has been paying off. Even though Rocketman actually surprisingly did not do very well here at the Oscars in terms of nominations, Taron Egerton got nominated, you know, at BAFTA for Best Lead Actor and at SAG. Rocketman got some sound awards too. It got some costume awards in terms of nominations and things like that. So it has the support from the industry, even though it didn't get in for the Oscars here. And I think it actually is the most supported film, more than Breakthrough or Harriet or Toy Story 4. I think people still like Rocketman. Elton John has been campaigning, and I think this will pay off, and they're going to go with the Rocketman song here. Then for Best Sound Editing and for Best Sound Mixing, I have the same pick, which is 1917. For Best Sound Editing, it almost always goes to a war movie, and almost if it's nominated for Best Picture, that's almost essentially a guaranteed lock. And actually, in recent years, they have been lining up. So we have Dunkirk a couple years ago, Bohemian Rhapsody, both lined up, and other war movies that were nominated for Best Picture, including Hurt Locker. And if you consider Mad Max a war movie, or even something like an American Sniper or Hacksaw Ridge, they always win a sound award. So I wouldn't begrudge you if you went Ford v Ferrari, but the stats, and even, you know, BAFTA's Best Sound, or it won an award at MPSE. Overwhelmingly, it seems like the war movie in generally just automatically gets the sound categories. I'm predicting 1917. If I'm predicting for Best Picture, it should get for both these sounds, for Best Sound Editing and Best Sound Mixing. Then we have the sort of final three categories, which are the shorts, which I'll go just briefly down. For Best Animated Short, I'm going with Hair Love from producer Matthew Sherry, who has been going around and campaigning for this very heavily. Also a movie from Sony Pictures Animation. So it's Charming, which usually these animated shorts do well in. It's also from a major studio and generally sort of populist, so that helps its chances. Then Best Documentary Short, I'm going to Learn to Skateboard in a War Zone If You're a Girl, which has a great title. And the reason why I'm picking it is because it got a BAFTA to actually win, but also because of its name. If you look at the previous winners, Period, End of Sentence, and Heaven is a Traffic Jam on the 405, they just have great names. And I think this one has a great name. I think people are just going to check it off, even if they haven't seen it, because of that name. Then we have Best Live Action Short. I'm going to go with The Neighbor's Window. For me, it's a situation of an apple in a bag of oranges. It's either going to be Nefta Football Club because it's the only one that's sort of charming and cheery, but I actually think it's going to be The Neighbor's Window because it's the only one that's the American one, the only one that's in English. So it's got this sort of thriller aspect, but it's also American. I think people are going to appreciate that. But that's about it, guys. Those are my final predictions for the 2020 Oscars in all 24 categories. Like I said, I'm still going to be doing a reactions video, and then after that, I'm going to be doing a whole brand new series. So I hope you subscribe to the channel and let me know all of your opinions on my Oscar predictions and why you think I'm wrong in certain categories, and then you come back and see how well I did. That'll be a lot of fun. I want to thank you once again for the 4th Old Oscar Countdown season that we've done. You've been incredibly supportive. The channel has been doing better than ever, and I really do appreciate it, and all the sort of community and feedback that you've been putting in the videos, because those are the reasons why I do these videos, to create a great sort of community and that I hope to one day achieve. And we've already got a great community within ourselves, so give yourself a pat on the back, like the video, subscribe to the channel so you never miss a video, and that's about it, guys. Until next time, stay tuned.